So the real question is, can we still get Netscape Navigator and go find those 1997 posts somehow? Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Very special guest, fellow Canuck, fellow Catholic, all around good guy. We've got John Henry Westen on the show. We are going to talk about how John Henry went from this young guy writing articles in a basement with a wood stove to the head of a very well known international pro life advocacy and news outlet. So stay tuned. Mr. John Henry Westen, how you doing?
Hey, Kennedy, so good to be with you. I'm doing great, thank you.
Well, you know, a lot of people know about your work, but they don't know just how well you can actually grill a steak. And it was about 2.5 years ago. My family, we were up visiting you and your wife and children. We were up at a cottage, and you pulled out some steaks, and you pulled out your phone, and you had it a perfect timing for each side, and each steak was perfect.
Beautiful. Yeah, and enjoy doing that. Don't get to do it very often, but that's great. It was great to have you and your beautiful family. It was amazing.
Thank you. And we're expecting number 7 coming up, so we're
Oh,
growing.
wow.
We're
Wow.
we're in the market for one of those big vans. They call them Lefevrelets. That's the joke. We're in the market for one of those big extended 10, 12 seaters or whatever. So
I remember, well, we got the 15 seater and took out the back seat for storage and luggage. That works well.
my wife wants a Mercedes Sprinter, and I said, "Well, sweetie, I'm gonna have to sell about 10,000 more books before I can do that." So we might have to go for the Savannah or the Ford Transit or something. But in any event,
Yeah.
so, John Henry, so now LifeSite is this huge international thing. You guys are in Rome. You guys are international. I was just down at Front Royal and at Mass there visiting some friends, and there's the office down there, and there were people there that I used to work with who were going to Mass there. It was fun to see them for the first time in a while, and LifeSite's big. LifeSite's professional. You got this nice camera. You've got this beautiful website, but it started off kind of in this weird, obscure way. Why don't you bring us through? Actually, before we say that, why don't you just tell us how you even came to work for LifeSite? Because you're like an educated man and you found your way into this thing. So how did that even start?
Yeah. Well, LifeSite wasn't a thing. I finished an undergrad degree in psychology. I had a big scholarship, did my MA, and then I had a big scholarship to do a PhD. It was about 2 years away from a PhD. Got married at the time, and I was in always psych. I did school in child clinical psych at University of Toronto, and at the time, as is now, psych is a highly secular profession, but I felt very called to share the good news, if you will, share the faith, and I knew I could not do that as a psychologist, at least not openly. And so somehow didn't feel called to go on. My wife thought, oh, he just needs a break. He's been like 7 years post secondary, But I was at a church praying, Lord, what do you want me to do? And I was directed to Campaign Life Coalition, which is the major pro life group in Canada. They had a newspaper with a very small circulation. And basically, a lady at a church told me that, I feel God's calling you to sell the paper for them. And I was like, cool, because I somehow knew it was our Lord talking. So that sounds really strange. I got down there to interview with them. The head of the organization was very gruff with me because he figured I was a spy for Planned Parenthood. And so after having to give him not only my credentials, but that didn't impress him at all because that was just led him more and more to the conclusion that I was a spy for Planned Parenthood. Um, my dad is a white guy with blue eyes, but he's also a donor to Campaign Life. And that's how I got in. I said, look, his name is Henry Weston. I'm John Henry Weston. I know I don't look like him, but that's because my mom's from India. And so it went from there to, oh, okay, you can't sell the paper for us. I need you to do research. That research got me on this trajectory of doing daily reports. The daily reports became like daily news because it was about, 5 of the most important things going on in the world today. And that's it. at the time, this is 1995, by the way. At the time, Catholic World News also launches, and they're doing basically what I'm doing, except they're interviewing people and throwing the interviews into the story. And I was like, wow, I'm in touch with like every pro-life leader around the world because we're all through the pro-life movement. So I started doing that as well. This is into now 96. LifeSite doesn't exist at this point. In 1997, Campaign Life Coalition said, we need an internet. They meant they need a website, but at that point it was so new, nobody knew the terminology even. So Jim Hughes, who was the president at the time, his right-hand guy named Steve Jelsovac was tasked with building an internet for Campaign Life Coalition. He did that. And if someone suggests in the office, this is office in Toronto, and by the way, I'm living way out, raising a family in Bancroft, Ontario. And so, uh, yes, indeed. And so they said, why don't you put John Henry's news thing, which had become a daily uh, news? It was called CLCDNA, Campaign Life Coalition Daily News Alerts. And someone suggested to Steve, why don't you put John Henry's news thing on the website? And so he did. And the only URL he could find was LifeSite. So it was LifeSite. He couldn't even get the .com at the time. And so LifeSite was born. And after a few months, Campaign Life Coalition got frustrated because they said, hey, everybody's coming just for the news and they're not coming for all of our stuff. And so very soon thereafter, they created another website for Campaign Life Coalition. And so that's how the two websites were born. And eventually, after even just a few years, LifeSite outgrew its the parent company in a way, and separated sort of very amicably. Just we just became our own entity. And Jim Hughes, who was the president, was very good at birthing a lot of different groups who, when the initiatives came along, they gave them initial support, and then they went off on their own. It's very much like the birth of Real Women Canada, of Euthanasia Prevention Coalition, which is now an international organization, and things like this. So those organizations all came out of Campaign Life Coalition, as did LifeSiteNews. And sort of that was the birth. And it was a very strange thing because Steve and I were separated by 4 hours. So we went forward in a joint venture, sort of based solely online, which sounds really weird. But LifeSite did grow. It grew organically and slowly, but it started to gain a lot of recognition already in 2000. We made international news in the year 2000 right away. And then from then on, it really did start to take off. So that right now, we have 70 employees all over the world. We run, not only do we do our regular news, about 30 articles a day every day, professionally produced articles, by the way. And Kennedy would know, he was one of our writers once upon a time. And it was arduous. I think it can be said that it's a very strict regimen of news and doing it professionally, and that's why you know it so well, Kennedy. But it is not an easy task. It's not like say whatever you want, but we really do take seriously news as a profession. But also for us, LifeSite is an evangelization message. That's really what we're about, and we use the news as a hook to evangelize.
So the real question is, can we still get Netscape Navigator and go find those 1997 posts somehow?
That was very, very challenging. I'll admit, back in the day, there was no Google. The search engine was Alta Vista. It was I had a lot of RAM on my computer so that I could turn it on and go up, help with the kids, go to mass, come back, and after it was like 2 hours, the first 30 or so websites I went to were open. Thereafter, I would have to click and then kind of come back to it because nothing would open right away. So after clicking for an hour, you would then come back to the first article you clicked on, and there it would be. And that's how it went. So it was a bit discombobulated that way, but that's what you had to do back in the day. Dial up internet in a remote location of all things. And so yeah, it was also freezing in the basement. We didn't have heat down there, so I wore a coat. And because this was a brand new venture without any funding, um, it was almost a labor of love, almost completely so. So that I was teaching politics and psychology during the day at a local college, non-Catholic, just a secular college, and at night would do LifeSite. And that I still remember our firstborn child. I was rocking her in the middle of the night while she was crying in her parka, and I was down there with my coat on, but with those gloves with the fingers free so I could type. So yeah, it was a very interesting time indeed.
Yeah, I can relate in a way. This is my first time being a non-subterranean internet person. I did have when we first moved to this house, I did have an office for like 4 months until we had another baby, and then that became the nursery. And I was in a box in my basement that I used to record audiobooks. And in the middle of the winter, I would basically see my breath. And it was great in the summer. We don't have AC, so in the summer it would still remain cool. This room gets kind of warm, but nonetheless, yeah, that's fascinating. So, what was that first? There was the story, if I remember from one of our meetings we had when I was working there. It was something to do with the Women's March or something, and the bishops in Canada. Was that the kind of first story that went viral?
Yeah. So in the year 2000, we would follow basically what was happening in the life and family scene. There's a lot going on. We would promote John Paul II a lot because JP2 would speak on pro life every day and pro family things, obviously. And so we had a lot of church coverage, but we also covered what the pro abortion side was doing. And one of the things that they did constantly was this March of Women. It's an international thing. And it was a thing that was pro abortion, pro lesbian. And so, I mean, it was largely ignored by the church, at least we thought. And what happened was I would go to their sponsorship page just to out to the public that, here are these, like Pepsi or whatever, are promoting this big pro abortion march, and that's nasty, and we should boycott them for it. So I was doing that one day, and I got to their site, looked at the sponsorship page, and lo and behold, it said it was sponsored by the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops. And I thought, that's impossible. So I called up. And that's one thing, by the way, right from the beginning, we were all about going to primary sources. So I did. I called up the CCCB, the Canadian Conference, and I spoke to the priest who answered the phone, and I told him, hello, Father, and I told him who I was. And at the time, LifeSite's not that much. So I just told him I'm a reporter for something online called LifeSite, and I'm just inquiring about your sponsorship of this March of Women. And I don't know if you realize this, but it's a pro-abortion organization. And I was starting to lay this out. And he stopped me from speaking. He said, look, it's pro-woman. And it is, we just gave a nominal donation. And I said, okay. How much? And he started to fumble, and it's just a nominal donation. And I pressed him for it. So he said, $10,000 or so. Okay, this is this is coming up to the year 2000. So you're 1999. In the pro-life world, $10,000 is huge.
That was half a salary for a lot of employees in the pro-life world then.
I'm sorry, Kennedy, you broke up.
I was going to say that was like half a salary for some employees in the pro-life movement, then annual salaries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I thanked Father. I took down his name and so on, and we're ready for the report now. And I called up Jim Hughes, the head of the Campaign Life Coalition, and they ran and founded the March for Life in Canada. And I said, hey, Jim, how much do the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops give you every year for the March for Life? And he laughed. He laughed. I think he almost fell out of his chair laughing. He said, they don't give us anything. I was stunned because I said, Do you know they're giving $10,000 to the pro-abortion March of Women? And of course, that just changed the game in a big way in Canada. In fact, what happened was when we published the story, the Cardinal Archbishop of Toronto at the time, who was Cardinal Ambrosich, he objected publicly to the funding of the March of Women. By the way, all of the bishops in the United States had boycotted the march because it was pro-abortion and pro-lesbian, except for the Canadians, of course. And then what happened in the wake of the Cardinal Archbishop of Toronto coming out opposed to it, you had 4 other bishops publicly support the Cardinal Archbishop of Toronto in opposition. Mind you, you also had 6 bishops come out in favor of the March of Women. So as insane as that sounds, you had a public fight. And apparently, if you go to the history books, it's in the Canadian history books, you will find that that is the first and major public break of the bishops' collegiality in Canada since the Second Vatican Council. And so I think thereafter they did some kind of meeting to promise never to do that again. But that, of course, went mega viral. It was in all the mainstream media. It made international media as well. And I'm not saying that put LifeSite on the map, but it definitely did work to increase people's awareness of LifeSite News. And that was really one of our first major stories.
Well, and I can relate to how things changed in LifeSite, having worked there long after that. You're saying in the beginning, you would call them up and they'd say, who is this random guy? Okay, I'll talk to you for a few minutes. Whenever I would be doing a story and they'd say, you got to call, like I had to call the Jesuits of Canada for one thing. And I'm like, oh my goodness, why am I even doing this? I'm going to call them and they're going to say no comment. And I knew it, but we had to do it for due diligence. But now it's called being life-cited. So the bishops of Canada just really don't want to be life-cited. And this is the beginning of that, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed. We were actually on friendly terms with a lot of the bishopric at the time, because remember, we were very close to the Vatican. So I happened to meet John Paul II in 1993. I was so grateful for Denver. And that inspired me. And actually, I was really inspired by Mother Angelica, because at the time of her big rant back in 93, it was an inspiration. And when we got more and more into church politics, but basically into trying to uphold the line on life and family that John Paul II was giving and teaching, it was a beautiful thing. It was a beautiful thing because he was so set on fighting population control and working with the pro-life movement. Many of my friends now sat at the Pontifical Academy for Life with John Paul II. So even if our local bishops sometimes were opposed to us being pro-lifers and didn't really disdain the pro-life movement, the Pope always had your back. And so more and more we worked with different dicasteries in the Vatican, and involved ourselves with the Pontifical Academy for Life and the Council on the Family. And it was just great because it was a very positive working relationship. When Benedict came in, we, by this point now, are much bigger. And we're actually playing some interesting roles with exposing some of the different machinations. There's a war going on inside the church over the issues of life and family and the kind of way to navigate that in the world. And so the LifeSite that's known now of over the past 12 years of a kind of a war, if you will, with the Vatican is a very different entity than it was under the previous pontificates to Francis. In fact, I met Francis in 2013 because I was one of a few pro-life leaders called to participate in the commemoration of Evangelium Vitae in the Vatican. If you can imagine that, it sounds almost like storyline.
That sounds crazy now.
So
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
And yet, we have the video still. You can go look it up. There was 3 pro-life leaders asked to lead the prayers in St. Peter's Square. So we processed up along Via della Conciliazione, right into St. Peter's Square in the evening at the sort of candlelight prayer service before the vigil, if you will, to the commemoration mass of Evangelium Vitae. So yeah, it's been an interesting trajectory. LifeSite has grown, praise be to God, over many, many years. And I think for a lot of people who, especially those who knew us for a long, long time, he's been very consistent because despite the vagaries of where things have gone, also in the church even, um, the lines at LifeSite have been basically the same. And so there's a lot of consistency that way, despite the uproar. There has been that. But it's been a real joy. We've been blessed with amazing people who the Lord has sent to us to work with us, sometimes only for a time, like yourself. But it's really an amazing thing.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very professionally run organization, and it's interesting you mentioned the necessity to be precise, because when you read in Canada we have like the CTV and whatever, you read the mainstream news websites, which are just if I tell a little anecdote and as an aside here, I remember because the bulk of my work was from 2021 through 2023. And so a lot of the COVID time. And I remember, they would release the information from the Ontario health authorities. And I would often be on the sort of local beat, of course, me being local. And so I'd go to the hospital websites and the ministry websites and read just the raw data. And I would say to myself, okay, I just read the CTV and they didn't tell any of this. And they'd pick out, like, if there's like 12 columns, and then one of them is 17 to 24 age demographic, vaccinated, unvaccinated, and in that particular little blip there was like a 4% increase in unvaccinated cases or whatever. It's all very stupid data. They would be like, COVID cases rise among 17 to 24-year-olds. And then I would say, well, I actually read the graph, and it was like 15% higher in every other demographic that was vaccinated. And so when you read these mainstream sources, they don't even do hyperlinks. They don't even put the link to where it is. They say, oh, according to so and so. Whereas we always had to make sure that we had to put it, because under the microscope you're going to get a lot more flack. So is that part of it too? Is you just know that because of what you're saying, someone's going to shut you down if you don't do something properly?
That, and we invite accountability, because we're all about truth. We're about the ultimate truth, Jesus Christ himself. And so what we've tried to do all the time is to provide the truth as the best that we can get at it. Now, mind you, we've made some errors and we've done corrections. We do that. We apologize and say, look, here's how we got it wrong, and provide the correction. But it's a stellar work. It's a work of real journalism. It's old fashioned, if you will. But it's done, and it's done as a labor of love as well. We have some, Ivy League educated folks who are just stunningly good. In fact, I'll just mention quickly, one of the ones who pointed out the plagiarism of Father Thomas Rosica, a big, huge figure in the church, who was really not so much, people will say, taken out, but his hypocrisy was exposed largely thanks to the work of Dorothy McLean, LifeSite's Dorothy McLean, who she's a Boston College grad. She was a journalist for many, many years before she came to LifeSite, and she's just incredible as a journalist, and now as an editor as well. But she's just so not only studious, she just is a researcher par excellence, and just did amazing work. And it's actually done in a spirit of charity. So even though we were reporting on the, especially journalistically and academically, dastardly deeds of someone who really was an avowed enemy of LifeSite, went around bad-mouthing us everywhere, it was done with a view to hoping, and sincerely hoping, he got help, that he was able to reconcile himself not only with journalism or academia, but with our Lord, because in promoting homosexuality as he was, that wasn't good for his soul. And so that's, we have our the way we operate at LifeSite really is caritas in veritate, with a real attempt to recognize, even in our ideological enemies, if you will, not enemies for real, but people who need conversion, whom we love, and will try and work toward their conversion, hopefully in a way that we can reach them. But that's very difficult.
I'm really glad you brought up Dorothy, because I was actually going to bring her up just before you did, and she was my editor for because of our time difference and the way it worked. She being over in UK, and so she would edit a ton of my stuff. And after about a year working with her, I just started calling her Professor. Because yeah. I was like, "What do you have for me today, Prof?" And she, "This is great, kid, but you got to fix these things and stuff." And it's amazing you mention. It's amazing that you mentioned the Rosica thing. It's such a small world, John Henry, and Providence is a very funny thing. So when I started as a teacher, I was working for the Huron-Perth Catholic District School Board. I was summarily canceled from there at some point for being a little bit too Catholic. And never did anything wrong in the classroom, but my views were too Catholic for whatever. And so the first PD day we had, Professional Development Day, when I was a rookie teacher, I was sitting in a gym at St. Michael Catholic High School in Stratford, Ontario, where I ended up working for 5 years. And the guest speaker was Father Thomas Rosica. And he was, this celebrity, whatever. And I was kind of liberal at the point. Like, I admittedly had just sort of had a come to Jesus moment, and I didn't know what I was doing. So I didn't know a James Martin from James Altman. You know what I mean? I didn't know anything. And so I'm just like, oh, it's a priest, and he's, speaking. Okay, I'm listening, whatever. And some of the things I thought, this is kind of weird. I don't know, but whatever. What do I know? And then time goes on, and I get much more conservative and all these sorts of things. And I found this place called Church Militant, and I found this place called LifeSiteNews, and the classic trajectory of the modern sort of traditionally minded Catholic. And I remember one day I was sitting in my classroom, and I was watching something from one of the places from being in Rome, talking about the problems in the Vatican. And then I walk out of my classroom, and the man who was hired to be the chaplain was best friends with Thomas Rosica and worked for our diocese, comes out talking about how he just got off a phone call with Rome and whatever, he was going somewhere with Rosica and the next whatever. And I just thought to myself, I thought, this is getting way too close for comfort. This is weird. It was a very strange thing. And then when I found myself working for LifeSite, I thought, it's very weird how small this world is. And I worked with Dorothy when Rosica was trying to make his comeback. That was when I had to call the Jesuits, because they were going to hire him for something. And her intention was, we need to stop this man from hurting himself. And it really was a beautiful, and we did. And he stopped, and they canceled the event and everything. And thanks be to God, because ultimately it's not about owning your enemies or whatever. It's about, this is evil and we don't want you to do it. So we're going to help you help yourself. And we wish you didn't have to, but this is what it's come to.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny. You remember from your time at LifeSite, we pray for them as well. It's funny. I remember we were sued by a priest once, and I had to go to court for it. But I remember my kids during the rosary, when they were all little, as we were offering our intentions, and Daddy, for that priest that's suing you. Yeah. For Father Raymond Gravel, God rest his soul. He, But yeah, there's been a lot like that. But it is a very sincere and really beautiful thing. And I think Dorothy really does live that out. A lot of she too's a Canadian. Most of our staff's American.
The best ones always are, John Henry. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. She lives in Scotland, though. So we are very international. We're literally all over the world. So it's a beautiful work.
Well, you can see I'm ecumenical because I have American flags on my left from friends that sent us, and there's maple leaves on the window there. So, okay, so let's, for the last 10, 15 minutes or so, let's talk about briefly kind of how COVID changed LifeSite and the challenges, which we could probably talk about that for 2 hours. But I came in August 2021, so there was already about a year and a quarter of dealing with the insanity. But it really did change things. LifeSite rose And at the same time, it was taken off YouTube and stuff. And that's sort of a new chapter. So why don't you bring us through how that changed everything for you?
Yeah. So it was unreal. We cottoned on to COVID early. So, in the beginning, like everyone else, we were doing this, oh boy, it's very serious. There's a lot going on. And in fact, gosh, even masking, we were like, wow, look at this happening. And there was, doctors saying, oh, you should wear a mask. And so, if anything, I was an early adopter of masking until other doctors, experts said, what are we doing? This is not going to do anything. And we were like, wait. So there was some skepticism to start off. It was because you got different reports from different doctors. But very soon, particularly when they were proposing a vaccine made, if you will, on the backs of aborted babies, but using an embryonic stem cell line from an aborted baby, if you will. That was one thing we knew was wrong, but the shutdowns, when they were shutting churches down and not grocery stores and not liquor stores and not pot shops, that was totally fishy. The shutting down of the holy sacrifice of the mass, when they didn't do that for the other real plagues, if you will, or plagues, made no sense. And things started to happen, like they shut down Lourdes. Oh,
The healing waters, yeah, shut those down.
You're going to need healing for, and you're going to shut down the healing, but it made no sense at all.
Oh, yeah.
So we started to talk to experts, and some of the honestly best experts in the world. Dr. Peter McCullough, for instance, is the most published doctor on the specific expertise needed, and he was shut down. And because we went to these experts and we were willing to interview them and tell it like it is, we were hard canceled. So our first YouTube channel had 315,000 subscribers when it was canceled, which was tough. And within a year, we had built up another channel to, I think, 97,000 subscribers. And it too was canceled. The first one canceled for medical misinformation. By the way, all of which information is now known to be true. In fact, we know now that they knew back then that it was true. But
well, and YouTube, if I might interject for half a second too, I've never had a strike on my channel, but I did have a warning from something I never published, but it was on the back end and I wasn't sure, and the algorithm caught it. And when they finally took the warning off, I had to do like retraining to get it off. Whatever, fine. And they've changed their rules. So now, for example, and if YouTube, if you're listening, I'm just following your rules. You aren't allowed to say things like, the vaccines are dangerous. You're not allowed to say explicitly in and of itself. And you're also not allowed to say it's impossible to be harmed by one. So basically, back then, it was like, if you say anything bad about it at all, then you'll be shut down. Whereas now you just have to say things like, well, research shows this, and it also shows that, if you're going to talk about that anyway. So they've softened a lot in their own right, but then they were ruthless.
Yeah. It was rather unbelievable. They started, I think the ruthlessness started to say, hey, we can cancel this, we can cancel other things. Because we were then canceled for our new channel, largely around hate, which they deemed as hate. And it was over a show that was giving the Catholic teaching on homosexuality in a very charitable way, in fact. So that was pretty stunning. But how that works on their back end, we don't know exactly. But those were the charges that were stated. They were the strikes that caused the cancellations. And these are hard cancellations. I remember being on Steve Bannon. That's soul crushing. And it's meant to be. And it was because it was twice. It was the first one when it was a much bigger channel. The second one when it was, we grew it. And at this point, we're on YouTube still on a very small channel that we don't use much, or we don't give much prominence to, because frankly, we're a bit scared. We had to build our own video servers in order to maintain freedom. And that, that has an associated massive cost and whatnot. But we felt we got to do it just to be cancel proof for those who will still be there. And so, we don't promote much that we have a YouTube channel, a YouTube presence on LSN TV, but it is there. So we just leave it there, and who knows what they're going to do. They are changing their algorithms. I think the Trump administration has helped a lot of people say, maybe we should go down the road of a little bit more freedom. The crush is on freedom is just, it's not liked as much as it was back in the day.
Well, it's not profitable anymore because now, I mean, it's like, the biggest podcasters are Tucker Carlson and, Joe Rogan and stuff. And Joe Rogan may not be good on some things, but, and I don't personally listen to him, but I do know that he does give a platform to many people who would have been canceled from any polite society just a couple years ago. So there's a big dollar sign attached to that, and they'll always follow the money. And so how has the LifeSite video platform done? Like, is it, if you could, I know it doesn't post the views, it doesn't show the count, but is it comparable to what was happening before? Like, people have migrated over?
No, I think that transition is a very difficult one. So the answer to that is no. It's got its very faithful following, but I don't think it compares in terms of views. But we'll see. It continues to grow, which is good, and it's there so that we can't be canceled. And it's worth it for us that way, because frankly, don't trust building your house on someone else's property. We learned that hard during Facebook. Facebook used to be 78% of our traffic, and since our shadow banning on Facebook, it's less than 1%. And that really shows how much, and that's why so many people went down, not actually for cancellations on YouTube, but for cancellations on Facebook, because Facebook, when it decided to do the shadow banning, basically bankrupted a lot of places.
That's amazing. Not in a good way, but so what's the future for LifeSite? What's the sort of, you don't have to give us your AGM mission statement or something, but what's the next like 5 years? Hopefully, despite any crazy, who knows what will happen in the world thing that brings things in a crazy place, but what do you see for the next few years? Because you're getting on. I mean, you're still young enough that you've got, some time left, but you do have more grays than you did 10 years ago. So there has to be some sort of future, transitionary type thing. So what do you see in the future of LifeSite in the next few years?
A lot of different things. I see new audiences because we are branching out to do different things, different shows with different topic areas. And I think that's going to be very interesting. We've also got a bunch of new young people who are up and coming. In fact, it was neat. My daughter was able to cover for me at March for Life this year because I couldn't go because I was in Rome at the conclave. And that went really well. We have a number of our team doing social media posts that goes very well and sometimes goes very viral. So we have upcoming folks like that. There is a number of my co-hosts on several shows are branching out to do their own shows, which is great. Frank Wright being probably the most successful in that category. And so a lot of different content for different folks. It's also a new chapter in terms of the relations, if you will, with the church, because with the new Pope comes the end of the Francis era, which frankly was a disaster for the church. And so there's a totally new openness to relations with the Vatican. LifeSite never actually lost our Rome correspondent position. The Vatican never canceled us, as it did other entities, actually, because we've been around for a long time. And so it's been, I'm looking forward to what's coming. There's a lot of new blood at LifeSite, as there always has been. But it's interesting. I think our Michael Haynes, Rome correspondent, is just doing gangbusters.
He's doing really well.
Yes, and I think that's gaining himself a great reputation. A lot of people have compared Michael to Ed Penton, saying that he might very well be the next Ed Penton.
Well, I can see that. He's also British, and they sound really smart when they speak because of their fancy way of talking. So that'll always help. Well, this has been wonderful, John Henry, and I'm really happy that your staff reached out. It's been a while since we had spoken, so it was good to catch up on your channel. It's great to catch up on mine, and door's always open. So send me a note whenever you need something or whatever, or want something. And And that's great. So, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you go to LifeSite News. There's a Canadian section, an American section, and sort of a specifically Catholic section. So you've got everything you need covered. And if you do have some, resources to spare, it's a nonprofit and it runs off of generosity, and a little bit goes a long way. And one thing that was really cool to know, I remember when I was there, is how significant the Canadian support was. It was kind of punching above its weight, which I thought was really great because, it shows that despite what people say about Canada, you and I know what it's actually like here. And there's a lot of amazing, wonderful, conservative, very pro-life Christian people. And so it was good to see that LifeSite is largely kept afloat by fellow Canucks.
Yes, it is a beautiful thing. It's where our roots are and where we are planted, and the Lord's called us to stay. And it's, I think wherever the faith is persecuted, there's always going to be saints to stand up and shine. And here in Canada, the faith is persecuted in a way that it's not in, I don't think, anywhere else in North America. And we see, therefore, a lot of beautiful folks standing up and fighting for truth. Kennedy, God bless you. Thank you for having me on. God bless you on your 7th baby coming. Enjoy these years, even though it's tough. They do go away, and then you miss them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, John Henry. Ladies and gentlemen, check out the links in the description for anything we spoke about, and you can sign up for my Substack as well if you want more content that's not available on YouTube. And until next time, God bless you all. Bye-bye. Thanks, John Henry.
God bless you. Thank you.